IVM.
This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. The following excerpt is from New York Times. The Parsis kept their promise to the Gujaratis. In the 17th century, they started settling in Bombay when it was just 7 islands. They spearheaded the Indian Industrial Revolution by building the first steel mills and textile factories. They built ships and launched the country's first airline. They used their wealth to endow hospitals, laboratories, and schools. They were also the first to adopt British game of cricket, and the extravagant musical theatre production paved the way for Bollywood. Well, this illustrates there's so much rich heritage in the Parsi community, which lends itself a unique character and design sensibilities to Mumbai. Today we have Dr. Simin Patel with us on AudioGAN. She's a city historian and founder of Bombaywalla Historical Works, a project that documents Mumbai's various aspects and especially a bit of South Bombay and Parsi community. So thank you, Simin, for giving your time. It's a real pleasure to have you on AudioGAN.
Thanks, Kedar. Lovely to be here. And thanks for thinking of Bombaywalla. This is my second podcast ever.
Awesome, great. So yeah, we'll be doing a case study. Typically, I have 3 formats of interviews of this AudioGAN series. One is called the regular interviews. One is a case study where we just deep dive into one problem statement, one case study, one solution, or one project. And then there is AudioGAN biographies as well, which I've done very few, but typically talking to some historian or some scholar, or like a guru shishya parampara mein, who's the shishya. We talk and generally document his or her own guru. So that's biographies. So yeah, it's been quite a ride. And yeah, today it's about how are you trying to document, and that's what I'm going to document about Bombaywalla historical work. So I wanted to start off by reading out a small two small pieces from one of your articles. And this will probably set the context for how cute and interesting the documentation is. So I'll start off with that, and then maybe we'll come back to the come to the questions. Typing is a prerequisite for shorthand, and all children want to appear for exams. So Mrs. K.S. Balsara has divided her institute neatly. Shorthand in the front room and typing in the back room with the balcony. Or let's take another example. Prabhu Das Rastani Kalapi thought a circle of 7 babies would make a perfect logo for the talcum powder brand he was building in 1930s. I found these 2 really cute sort of lines that you have put in, which tries to capture some essence. So I'll ask more about it, but to begin with, what is, like, how does it matter, and what is Bombaywalla Historical Works project about?
Okay, that's a big question. So really, Bombaywalla works very closely with, text and photos. And photos are really what drives the text. So to rewind, I kind of go roaming around the city at all times. Even when I'm in a taxi going from one place to another, I'm always looking out, trying to see little establishments that catch my fancy. And the key thing in these establishments is that their architectural kind of original interiors are maintained. Very often, like, flooring is the first thing I see. And if the flooring is changed, I have dismissed the establishment, though there are like quite a few I'll tell you about that I covered despite the change in flooring, because, they were Catholic establishments. But that's another story. Really, so what I do is kind of find these establishments, become friends with the owner, interview them, then get the photographer, and we document these structures. And so then I get a bank of photos from the photographer, who then tells me which are his best works, his second best, and, 1 star, 2 star, and 3 stars, 3 being the highest. And then from that bank, I choose one header photo. So that photo, the header, will determine those lines that you read out. So in the case of Mrs. K.S. Balsara, she runs this Shorthand and Typing Institute in 2022. So it's this little sweet institute in Tardeo Road, close to where I stay. And basically, this wonderful photo of her where you can see half of her. You can see, her body, but not her face. And it's exactly standing between the room, which is the shorthand room, and the room behind, which is the typing room. So she's in the middle of those. You can't see her face, you can see her body and her very sweet dress and her very sweet shoes. And so the thing was to tell you something about how she's divided this institute. And, her body is divided in that photo. The next photo you see is of her hands. The third photo you see is also of her hands. And then the fourth photo, which is a bigger photo, is a beautiful portrait of her by photographer Philippe Kalia. So it's this coy, sweet way, body, then full portrait. So the thing is to give something away, not give everything away in the first line. And that first line is determined by the header photo. So there is some kind of strange science to it. But since I do this, once a month, one establishment per month, I kind of have it on, auto a little bit. So,
but why, as in, like, what's the nature of this documentation? Is it like your homegrown thing, or is it being done practice? Or because I've seen there's Humans of New York and Humans,
yes,
like we have replicated that.
Yes.
So there is some format. Like, is this like something which you like? How did you come about it?
Okay, so I was doing my PhD on the history of Parsis and colonial Bombay, and I was finding a lot of information on Bombay, the larger town city, and so I wanted to share that information with a wider audience, city goers. And I was based in England. I had some friends in Bombay, and we put together this little Bombaywalla blog in 2013. And last year we changed the format, made it more professional, and it's taken the form it has. And now I've moved away from that little bit colonial, that whole civic state kind of thing. And now it's really the stories of these little establishments in the city. But to feature, to make it, you got to have a historical establishment. So you might have a great story, but if your premises are totally, revamped, it's not going to feature in Bombaywalla. So the thing is that it has to catch my eye when I am in a taxi, when I'm walking aimlessly in a bazaar. The post that's coming up on Wednesday is of the Central Laundry in Girgaon. So I was walking in the Bhaji market in Girgaon, Kandewadi Lane, and I see this lady at the counter of this laundry, which opened in 1939, that Stapna and all is on there on top of the thing. And I was struck because, a woman at the counter, and I am also sold because as a woman, I want to see another woman, at the counter. And that's not so common. Her mother-in-law, one generation above her wasn't allowed to sit at the counter because we don't want the woman at the shop, but she is allowed to sit. So these are the things that drive me, and then they become the header photo is of her, of Mrs. Shubhangi Joshi of Central Laundry. So yeah, that's my story. And
yeah, no, but I'm just curious to understand, like, this way, is it a subjective thing, or is it that you have a checklist, or like, are there any, because everything can be documented, right? So
yes,
how,
yes.
like, are there any parameters like location, time, or community, or even like scarcity? Like, you've
Yes,
seen
yes, yes.
some places. So are there any, like, any structure to this?
I mean, the challenge for us is always to document before the building goes. So this laundry
Okay.
that I'm talking about, it's a chawl system, 8 buildings, but around them in Girgaon, every chawl, every wadi around them has been made into a tower. So, and for example, C. D'Souza, Gamdevi, hair cutting salon, all these places we've already covered no longer exist. So this is a huge challenge. I have to get the story. Photographer has to be available. We have to make a little video, which we've started to do since last year on each establishment. And that takes a little bit of time, making a 1-2 minute video. So we do a story plus video. But the absolute key is that it has to look like a historical establishment and have that charm of a historical establishment. And then you go, how are these guys managing in this new, like, all the towers have washing machines and this laundry is not getting any washing business anymore, only ironing more or less. How is it managing? So those are the kind of challenges.
Yeah, very beautiful.
Yeah.
And because even I'm into this sort of audiogan is about documenting.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
this question typically gets asked that how do you pick a guest or how do you pick a
Yes,
subject? And frankly, it's very intuitive.
absolutely.
It catches whatever, as you said, catches my fancy,
Yes,
and then but like then I'm sure you must be like stumbling upon these things on a very regular basis, because and then
yes.
there are also layers to it, like the one which has the well
Oh,
inside,
yes,
like deep
absolutely,
inside.
absolutely.
So then any methodology you follow, because I want to like come back to
Yes,
that main point of your short version, like why did you choose that format as opposed to any other.
right,
But just
right.
before that, how do you like
No,
start
so I mean,
this?
actually, if I tell you a little bit before when Bombaywalla started, it was just a side thing I was doing. And there I thought I would just have a photo maybe and say, okay, this building, this little feature like a gargoyle in this building. Look at this gargoyle or something like that. Name of building, year of establishment kind of thing. And then a friend of mine at Oxford, Orgo, said, listen, you have to write something. Don't just put a photo. So I said, okay, chalo, I'll write 3 lines. And if you think this is short, that was 10 times shorter than this. And it was just one photo. So what you're seeing of Bombaywalla is also a revised form from, say, 2, 3 years ago. This wasn't how it was,
Hmm.
always was. And, the idea was maybe not to have text. So those, I think I've always had an issue writing, though even though my career is about writing, it's not easy. And maybe that's why I write so little and everything I do takes so long. But I mean, that's how it came. Now these are photo essays, have kind of become like photo essays plus a little video, like a short.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, this masala makers that you're talking about, they're masala makers by week and well keepers by weekend. Amazing story. And they have a stall in Fort Market and they have this well in their home in the heart of Fort. And all these homes had wells. And now we go looking for this house and this well, but most homes in Fort had wells. And the wonderful thing is that they had well spirits. So they have these
Hmm.
spirits dwelling in the water. And so many, they say, of the Parsi homes had Mohammedan spirits, well spirits.
Wow.
So interesting. And this is kind of now the only, really living, worshipped well in the area that people know about.
Are they refilled? Are they like it's a drinking format, or it's just like some holy angle to it now?
Well, I mean, there was a time when it was used by the water carriers and stuff of the area who would come and fill from there. I don't think the family uses that water, but I'm not sure. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
And
reason why I ask you is because just couple of episodes ago,
yeah,
I interviewed Esh Viswanath. He's in Bangalore.
yeah.
He has a Twitter handle called Zen Rain Man, and he's
Okay.
been doing water conservation and
Oh,
water
okay.
sanitation for very long.
Yeah, yeah.
And we spoke about how our wells designed.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
that's
that's
that's how I
really
connected. How
interesting.
those
Yeah.
like.
So, I mean, a lot of people in the locality come and worship at that well. So, I mean, it's not, different Hindu communities, different people come and worship over there. And then the family also obviously worships at the well. And the man who founded this masala maker business has passed away, but he looked after all the wells in the Parsi fire temples in the city. So on the weekends, he would go with a team and clean each Parsi, I mean, over the year, each well every weekend. So it's that
Hmm.
dual life, which is amazing. Masala maker and well keeper is like a wonderful combination. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
beautiful indeed. Yeah, yeah. And then how do you draw a line? Do you have like some geography to it? Because it, yeah,
Yes.
it like we have some interesting architectures in Matunga and
Yes,
Siam
yes, yes.
also.
No, absolutely. There are 2 laundries that I spotted in Matunga, one of which we've already covered but not put up. So Matunga is very interesting. And that whole story of King's Circle, no, everyone knows each other there. And there are King's Circle stories. So, you can't do that laundry in isolation without knowing about Cooler and Company, without knowing about one Michael Ka Adda for Daru. There's that whole life of the area. And that only happens when you speak to a couple of establishments. So my knowledge was with Cooler and Company at Matunga, which I was covering for my Irani Cafe book. And then I could use those stories when I was speaking to the Orient Laundry man, because I had that knowledge to which he added many, many stories. So as you do more, your neighborhood history increases, which is like a great thing. So
yeah, just coming to this question, that why to document or why do these stories matter? Are you sort of intrigued by, or are you anxious to arrive at a pattern by looking at it? I mean, because when I saw the website, it had very distinct different kinds of stories apart from the theaters or the cinema houses. There's a pattern to it. But rest all could be like independent stories. So like, is there any thought process of having, like, say, let's cover all laundries in Mumbai? Is there?
Yeah, well, yes, there's so many wonderful laundries. It's kind of amazing. And the patterns emerge. So the first, we did Puttu and Sons, and he said that, next to us there was an Irani which has closed down. The doors, collapsible doors, and a lock was there. If he hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known. Then we go and do the star dyeing and cleaning works in Kolaba. And this gentleman, Mr. Sequeira, said there was an Irani next to him as well. So there are some organic patterns that emerge. And also, you want to try and draw some connections. One of the other wonderful rhythms and patterns is of the timings and this afternoon closing. So sometimes some of them didn't have afternoon closing. Now they have afternoon closing because, there's not that much customers. Some of them were closed and now are open because it's this retired couple. I mean, this kind of older couple in Matunga, the one I was telling you about. They can't go back and forth. And first only the man used to come. Now the wife helps him. He can't see very well. She's kind of, I think, suffered a stroke, small stroke. It's so sweet, kind of, reminded me of my own parents. And that's kind of, a couple that comes in the whole day because they can't kind of go back. Whereas another couple in their 50s doesn't have much work, so they go back home. So these are the kinds of things, like, yeah.
They sound very sweet, but then why? I'm just like pushing you to, like, why to tell stories? Or maybe you can just first probably give us like some idea about what's your take of storytelling, or why do you think these stories have to be told? I mean, I understand there's a personal angle to it, but if you have reflected back on it or done some introspection as to, like, this is good.
Okay, no. There's a thing to it. Proper reason is basically in my PhD, we do archival research. And then also the material and everything gets a little bit colonial and stuffy and even probably politically incorrect now because it's this colonial archive that you've got from the Maharashtra State Archive, spent like 4 years sitting over there and getting research done. Then what happened with this Irani Cafe book is it was basically a whole oral archive, okay, of these gentlemen now in their 70s, 80s speaking to me about second generation Iranis in Bombay, Irani owners, and just telling me the whole history of their life and their girlfriends and their bikes and, all their physical culture, all the gyms they would go to and what bosses they were, in the neighborhood. And that oral history is not something anyone else can get. It's your techniques of interviewing and your rapport with the person. And I realized the value of the oral archive and the stories. So, when they say this colonial hangover, sobo, get over all this kind of stuff, you get over it when you change the archive. And the archive changes when you go to an oral archive or the archive of the shop, the books, the receipt books, the labels, things like that. So that's
and then do you plan, because right now you have a photo and maybe two lines.
Yes.
So yeah, any particular reason why you mentioned about you want to write less, but particularly this style, or there are other styles and similar documentation has been done in other parts of the world? Maybe if you can share some idea about it.
I'm not sure about those forms of storytelling, but after the captions we have on each photo, say 8 photos and captions, there's very small, but there is a little body text, about those Bombay wells and the spirits of the Bombay wells. That's a little bit body text, and then it's the video. So it's literally 3 kind of small ways of storytelling for each establishment.
Yeah.
So
I know. I mean, the reason I'm asking is this because the attention span is low and you want to just quickly encapsulate?
yes,
Because the videos also, what I saw was were really short, and like
yes, yes.
sometimes it's just like one still which is happening for like maybe 20 seconds. It's just one shot where there's like some bird going on or some very
Okay.
arty
Yeah.
slash abstract kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So is it conscious, or is it you have that style, or you want
Yeah,
to
no, I
maintain that
do
style?
think that whatever, I think we started in 2013 and sort of saw, I mean, there was, didn't really know Instagram and all then, but, it's a visual culture. There's not much time, attention spans are small. So, yeah, it's that kind of quick, that's the world and it suits me fine. So,
Got it, got it.
it works
Yeah.
both ways.
Yeah.
Um,
And for a person like me who would like to get like one level deeper,
yes,
is there like, again, stories seem to be pointing at certain things which
yes,
definitely have depth in it.
yeah.
So like if one has to go down deep, like what would you recommend, or what would you?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, many people, even when we used to conduct these walks, would then come and say, what do we read about Bombay in 1920s, 1930s? And then I do kind of suggest some books, or now I would even suggest some movies. We had a wonderful collaboration with this filmmaker, Rafiq Ilyas, over the last 3 days, where we shared his film called If Memory Serves Me Right. So,
I've seen that.
that 1 hour film on this cafe owner and film critic who passed away last year. And I mean, wonderful storytelling. And I would also suggest movies now. So I do get this, and then I kind of suggest different, books, movies, and nothing like going yourself and, going to that area, which is really what everyone should do, which is, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's take a short break. Yeah, we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show. So, would you mind sharing one interesting story, like whatever you've like documented so many, any particular which interests you, or made,
Well,
or maybe share some like a different perspective which was never seen from a Bombay when people perceive Bombay.
oh well, okay. Actually, share little nuggets of things. Like for example, in this, I like love stories. Trying to figure out if there's a couple or there are two people, husband and wife, running something. How did they meet? And with this Mrs. Balsara of the Central Shorthand Typing Institute, she's been running that institute for over 50 years. And very capable, educated woman. And then through the interviewing process, I learned that, she was a student of the founder. So, of the
Wow.
institute, then he becomes the principal of Government Law College and she becomes the principal of the Shorthand Institute. So she starts out as a student and then marries the principal of this institute. And then he moves on to Government Law College as a principal, and she becomes a principal of the institute she was a student at. Now, this didn't just happen. I mean, I had to, round, and she wasn't keen for me, to go on about it. But I like these love stories. And even this perfect confectioners and caterers at Chandanwadi, Mary and Tony, they're like a total unit. So I was like, how did you all meet? And then she was passing through the area. She used to pass through the area to go to her work. And he used to be at the counter and she had seen him. And then his friend put an ad in the Times of India, a matrimonial ad for him, which she spotted. And then she sent him the whatever she applied or replied, and the rest is history. So these kind of sweet, kind of little love stories are nice, and you have to work your way through them in the interview process.
Hmm.
Then, yeah.
You have to make them comfortable to extract that information, maybe spend more time. Sorry, you
Yeah.
continue first, then I'll
No,
come
no,
back. Yeah.
no. So then again, I mean, it's not a story, but C. D'Souza is this very interesting eatery in Dhobi Talao where there is never a single customer. It's just the most desolate kind of place around, or at least it was. And these two Catholic ladies sitting over there, still two different tables, sitting on these, bent wood chairs, like almost like an Irani setup, not saying a word, perfectly manicured nails and hair done. And, she was in her 80s, I think, and watching that world go by on Dukkal Gadi, that Sonapur Church Lane. And these women just sit still for hours, you know, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And then, get the photographer, run, run. And then we covered it and now it's all gone. So this is how things happen, it's a visual experience also, the stories. And
Mm-hmm. And so, is there any technique of like that you follow in terms of just spending time with them, or probe him with the right questions at the
yeah.
right time, or like any tips you should probably?
No, it's a total chase. And, basically, I've been so spoiled with the Iranis that I interviewed first. They were my first subjects and they were so good and so daring and they wanted to share everything and would give me chai, pani, berry pulao, batasa, make me sit for hours. And then all these other shops, and they're much much more careful. Iranis are kind of a daring community. These other guys are scared, whatever, suspicious, and really the Catholics have been the hardest for me to crack. I don't know why, but they don't really like to speak. And so it's a chase. You have to go back, win their confidence, take some photos to them that you've clicked, and try to buy their time. There's a small little place in Dhobitala I've been trying to cover. No one has ever looked at that place, given it a second glance. But those guys are just not interested. I go, I beg, I call, I message, nothing, nothing. So that's really.
Hmm.
And also with my subjects, they often don't get back to me about the post or anything. Like I know they've seen it, but there's no kind of recognition or response, which is a little bit worrying. But I guess that's how it is, like.
Yeah.
And this is across communities, so like Parsi establishments, everything. Mostly mother subjects don't respond to me after the post is up. So,
No, in fact, I completely get it, and it's a thankless job of archiving that you're doing, and that's why I was very curious to know your thoughts here. Yeah, so these was like the two stories that you mentioned,
yeah.
which were quite, and again, so like, do you think just the photo or and two lines,
Yes.
because typically in archival work, or typically it's said that history is written by the rurals
Yeah. Yeah.
rulers.
Yeah.
So you're documenting this. Any worry or any thoughts of it being misinterpreted because of like limited writing and limited
Hmm.
captures, or because they'll be like totally like these buildings are no more there, these
Yes.
establishments are
Yes.
no more
Yes.
there.
Yes.
So how do you see that panning out, maybe I don't know, 100 years out? What is the story going to sound like? Will it
Yeah.
be perceived the way it is, or any thoughts around there?
No, I think it'll give a more human sort of touch to these stories. Now these buildings and all are not there. You'll go back to the archives, you'll go to the records, you'll go through all these Bombay Improvement Trust reads and all these kind of civic documents. And then you'll probably notice when this building was demolished, redeveloped, stuff like that. So these are stories of the heart, and sort of people do say that some of your videos have a lot of heart in them. And this is, I think, storytelling in a more kind of true form, like the rhythms of the hours of the establishment. What are the breaks? What are the patterns? COVID. And, this whole new Bombaywalla we've done, as you're seeing it today, is a COVID baby. It was, reconceptualized. I had a little lockdown meltdown of my own and I completely redid Bombaywalla. And so every story we've done, the big stories now, which there's a difference also in the kind of group of posts that were there before and the ones that are there now. But from 2021, any posts that you see, these are all COVID establishments, COVID babies. So it's also a record of COVID and what these establishments went through, or and how many masks are there in the photos, and
in the videos
yeah,
also.
exactly. So really, I think it'll be an interesting archive for COVID, for understanding COVID in the city. Yeah,
And since it's a case study, I'll just double click on one more aspect,
sure.
that like any ways of monetizing this, or is it just going to be an archive? Because how do you,
Yes,
like, it has to be a sustainable.
absolutely. No, so actually, you're very lucky. We literally redid the site, and started with these videos and got a wonderful sponsor, a fashion brand called Khandwala Bombay, and they are invested in the city. And they have rebranded to include Bombay in their name, and so now they sponsor our content. So it's really good. I'm able to cover my costs. And very lucky to get a brand like this aesthetically, and the sensibilities of both the brands are totally matched. So we are very, very lucky to get them to support us. And then, therefore, I can also bring out a post every month. Otherwise, it would be difficult, time, resources. Yeah, it's and otherwise, I do some other consultancy work and that on Bombay, and then I put that into Bombaywalla. So to see how you keep Bombaywalla going, and I'm sure you're, these are all the questions we communities like ours ask, right? Like trying to keep something going. It's like, what you love doing, but it's not financially viable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of all our story. So,
Cool.
yeah,
Cool. I have one last question,
sure.
which is like, yeah, what's the future? What's the future of this project? And
Yeah.
actually, one more thing, which is how can one collaborate? How can one join? But yeah, what's the future
Yeah.
like?
So, I mean, we hope to cover more establishments. I've seen a whole bunch. I have a list that I'm just waiting to cover. So, this kind of establishment format. Then also things are a little bit slow with Bombaywala because I'm finishing my book on Irani cafes. Once that is done, I would be able to kind of do many, many more things with Bombaywala. Also incorporate that research into Bombaywala in a much more substantial way. Now I don't want to do it because I want that book to come out. But then I think there'll be a lot of overlap. So there'll be a lot more Irani material to add to the already existing Parsi material. But collaborations, no, we would love to collaborate with people working in the city, different forms. We're realizing video is getting a lot of traffic. Um, so different mediums is actually what's interesting. We also want to find people of the same sensibilities. Bombay is suddenly, actually, over the last 10 years, become a business. You can now have a business based on the city, and it's even slightly competitive. So how do you now get a story angle that no one else has? So you have to keep everything under wraps, and a story angle is very often an anniversary, like 90 years of this, 100 years of this shop, that becomes a story angle. Or how do you get that owner of this establishment who lives in the suburbs and comes to his thing once a month? You want him in the shoot because then it's like you've upped your game so much because it's so competitive now. So there's collaboration, but there's also a lot of competition. Which is good.
Yeah.
Which is good. It means the city is, thriving. I mean, work on the city is thriving. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember I did one series of 5 episodes with Bharat Flooring and Tiles.
Oh yes, yes, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
it was quite an interesting flow, because I spoke to Firdos, the owner of
Yes,
the
yeah, yeah.
thing, and then one Sushmita Chatterjee, who's an archival
Yes,
person.
yeah.
So yeah, it was quite like, yeah, there were 5 people. It was quite a good series there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's a small community of people working on Bombay, but it's definitely
Yeah.
between archiving, walking tours, documentation. These are the branches, but there are like 10 organizations you can point to today that are working on the city. So, and I would say this is the work of like 10 years, like, so yeah.
But any
Let's,
any guesses as to, still it's probably a finite geography. Any guesses as
what?
to how long it will take?
To document the city, or
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
Bombay is a gift that keeps giving, like you will
Hmm.
keep finding places. I think if you start in your 20s and you live to a good age, then you can say, I've documented the city well. But otherwise, no, there's stuff everywhere. And now I have friends, like my friend Dan Sequeira, who has a petrol pump in Ballad Estate, which is documented on Bombaywalla. He helps me with find establishments. He's a total Bombaywalla roaming around, and he finds places for me. Then I go check them out with him. He gives me an intro, then we cover them. So I have all these informers now, and they're like, So, and then it's like, it's going, this one's going, and so that rush, and it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Even Chirodeep Chaudhary, you
yes,
know him?
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he has, I think he has a separate collection of all the clocks.
Yes, yeah,
Those
yeah,
are on the walls
yeah.
of Bombay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. I think it's very fascinating, and we can continue. Generally, I'm run out of like formal questions, but yeah, I think
Thanks, kiddo.
we'll pack this for this particular episode. But yeah, all the best. It was lovely talking to
No,
you.
thank
Thanks for your
you.
time.
No, thanks a lot. And look forward to your other episodes. And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for thinking of Bombaywala.
No, no. Yeah, and people have to follow. What do they do? Like it's
So yeah,
Instagram. What's the?
Instagram Bombaywala, bombaywala.org for the website, which please do check out because that's the whole
Yeah.
shebang. And
And it's beautifully designed. Yeah.
yes, yes, and we have little videos and the story, and they should be seen together. And it's all quite mad, but it's all quite fun. So yeah, and Twitter, we're on Twitter, Facebook, everything, but do follow us. And there's a newsletter. So if you could sign
Oh,
up to the newsletter from the website, that would be really nice. So,
great, great. Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
okay. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Tina.
thanks. Yeah. And that's it from today's GAN session. For show notes and more GAN, visit audiogan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGAN Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.
Hello! It's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On This Round is on Me, Gauri is joined by Shweta Nanda. They talk about the financial independence and how it is to be a woman entrepreneur. On Anish Thing, Anish welcomes ultra-marathon runner Shivani Gharat. Shivani shares her journey of how she ran her first marathon, the mindset of a runner, and what it actually takes to run a full marathon. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Naveen, Akash and Shreyas talk about the Korean band BTS serving in the military and its repercussions. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita discuss Wing Greens and their latest acquisitions and about the Indian sexual wellness market. And on Shunyavan, Sheila Datya is joined by Dinika Bhatia, CEO and founder of Nuttigrities. They talk about coming from a business family and Dinika's journey in creating healthy and guilt-free snacking. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We have some exciting new merch out there for you. Also, do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And do remember to spread the word about these shows and any other shows you might be listening to. Appreciate them, rate them, and review them wherever you are listening to them. You can also check out all our other shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. Volvo XC40 Recharge, Bumble, Heads Up for Tails, Kotak Privy League Program, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thanks guys, without you this would not be possible.
Do you often find yourself surrounded by conversations about Web3, blockchain, NFTs, DAOs? What are these terms and how do they affect our future on the internet? So many questions, but don't worry, we've got answers to all your questions. Hi, I'm Eklavya Bhattacharya, and on our show Future Proofing, we try to decode the impact of these future technologies on various industries with experts and tech enthusiasts. Tune into new episodes coming out every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app and the website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.